Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is Wetworks number 1 by Whilce Portacio and Brandon Choi. I guess I'm going to show you something cool, so I guess here's the cool thing to show. Ta-da! It's a 3-page flip-out cover. I guess trying to do the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles impression here. Oh boy. So, Wetworks, this is the final book in my revisiting Image Comics series. I could do like, what is it, Warhawk and Gen 13 and Max, but not really super interested. And I think the books that I just covered here are kind of what most people consider as the important Image Comics first generation. Wetworks is important because it is Whilce Portacio, who, alongside Jim Lee, very, very famous X-Men artist. In fact, Whilce and Jim combined their powers together to get Chris Claremont off the books. Whilce kicking him off the Uncanny X-Men, and Jim kicking him off the adjectiveless X-Men. So Whilce, this was kind of his idea, and I think he submitted this, or I guess advertised this book way back in 92, or maybe it was 91. I forget when he advertised this book through Image Comics. But it did not get published till, let's see, when did this guy get published? This guy got published June 1994. So he was about a couple years late, I believe, on doing that. So, not particularly great right here. And I will say, after having read this, I don't know what took so long, because, man, I'm not going to make it a secret. I've kind of bashed on a lot of these Image comic books, especially for their story and writing. A lot of these were not great. The only one that really stands out is Savage Dragon, and the rest are, mostly to forgettable, or to just played out bad. Like Youngblood is just absolutely bad. This book, Wetworks, though, I probably brain dumped it faster than any of the books I read in this series. I'm just being dead honest with you, and I think there are two reasons why, and we'll get into it right here. So, this is Brandon Choi, so if you didn't like the writing from Wildcats, well, get ready. He gets a lot worse than Wetworks. Oh boy. So you get some introduction, geopolitical sort of things going on, and sort of, not really necessarily, like, he gives you the setting and sort of, I guess, the premise, but he still doesn't necessarily introduce the characters. They're introduced through dialogue, and here's the problem. The dialogue is not so great that the characters all stand out. Like, normally, like, when you take a look at, like, old X-Men books, like, say, Claremont and Stan Lee, etc., they all wrote the X-Men with very distinct and different dialogue. Sometimes a little too overboard, like in the case of Colossus, using Russian words and sometimes not the right Russian word. But at least there was an attempt made to have the dialogue differentiate the characters very explicitly. Wolverine had a certain way of saying things, Storm had a certain way of saying things, characters had a certain way of saying things. The problem with Brandon Choi's writing here is that the characters are not very distinct in the way they write. Everybody kind of sounds very similar. And the other problem with it is, and this is kind of a problem with any sort of book that has military personnel, just generic soldiers, special forces agents, etc., is everybody just kind of looks the same. There's only very small details. Like, you can tell one person is a woman, and like through like kind of memory, you can kind of remember that this guy is the leader, the colonel or whatever. But like Jester or Crossbones or whatever, they all kind of blend together. And this is kind of a problem with some G.I. Joe comics too. Some of the characters blend. That's why, like, G.I. Joe has these a little more ridiculous and wacky looking characters that kind of pop more. You kind of have to do that even if it's not realistic necessarily, because you got to visually distinguish characters from another. And getting into this right here, I mean, it's a bunch of exposition dumped dialogue, kind of explaining the situation, and they're jumping in to rescue or take out something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. And you get the introduction of Craven and who's it? Admiral Halsey, and that this was Team 7 that's getting sent out there. And this character is kind of sketchy, and for some reason something's shown into the Admiral, who's kind of objecting to this whole mission, and then suddenly he pipes up and says, okay, sure, it's all right. So again, just something all these Image comics do. They just leave a ton of mystery and subtext and basically unclosed plot threads out there to kind of get you to trick you to buy more books. In some ways, some of this is kind of like a rip of Chris Claremont. Like Claremont did this a lot, where he would leave plot threads all over the place that he hasn't finished. But the difference was the primary plot thread of the story that he is telling would usually get resolved in that issue or the next, or maybe he had a run of like 4 or 5 issues, but it would get resolved. Then the other side plot threads he would revisit at later dates. In this case, this is the number 1 issue in our introduction to these really terrible designs, and we're just kind of left into mystery land and confusion in the first couple pages. Ironically enough, this book, and I gotta say, dude, I feel like if you asked your boy Zach, he would probably say Brandon Choi is one of his favorite writers, because Brandon Choi writes very similar to the way Richard C. Myers writes. They're very similar. It's a lot of just freaking nerd dumping, and random specific things that they're interested in, and not a lot of interest in explaining what's actually going on in the story. It's just sort of like, well, go with it, I will say, though, I would say Richard C. Myers is overall a better writer than Brandon Choi, but I don't know if that's necessarily a compliment, considering this book isn't great. So you get this kind of, explanation of them, Team 7, jumping into action and the team splitting up. And I don't even know why this is even being said, because it doesn't really matter. Pilgrim, the lady, and the team member ends up coming back together. And this is kind of confusing because you don't realize that this character is a different character from the Pilgrim that they're mentioning. So when I first read this, I had to read it a couple times to kind of realize, no, this isn't Pilgrim, this is a different character. And Pilgrim is this chick over here. So because of the robot arm and stuff, it doesn't matter. They go in and they find the whole place shot up, and I'm surprised nobody noticed the vampire teeth immediately from the dead bodies, but whatever. They find these biotech weapons, and then apparently Morbius's sister shoots the tank, and this guy with the glasses, or are they glasses, or is it a bandana? Not even sure. Anyway, he gets hit by this gold stuff and becomes a gold man, and then all of this Team 7 gets in trouble, and they get ambushed and attacked by apparently vampires, which is very poorly explained both in the visual storytelling and the writing. These 2 pages here are man, it's just everything that can go wrong in storytelling goes wrong in these 2 pages. So what happens is they get into a fight with these characters, and what the writing tells you is a realization that these are vampires, right? And that, you have to cut off their head or go through their heart. But the art doesn't really tell you. It just tells you a team fighting and in stress, right? And so there's a huge disconnect between the art and the writing here. And I don't understand it, and it's just you don't really realize they're fighting vampires this whole time, other than through the writing, because the art does such a bad job. Speaking of which, and I hate to say this because Whilce Portacio is a good artist, but he's they leave their buddy behind, right? By the way, in general, these guys, Team 7, they're not really heroes. They kind of just kill people, I guess. So they end up leaving their buddy behind, who's getting shot up, and then he's in trouble. But then the rest of his team also take on biosymbiote things, which apparently make them look like villains. Am I the only one who kind of sits here is just first off, the design is so stupid. All of them are going to look like gold. So we went from all of them looking like generic commandos to all of them looking like gold men, freaking Jack Kirby era villains or something. And they get into a fight, and everything blows up, and then they walk out of the smoldering flames, I guess Terminator style. And then back at HQ, everyone's freaking out, and then there's another subplot thread that's just kind of left out there. This is actually a pretty cool panel. I kind of like this. This is almost like anime style, but yeah. They're about to get killed by some gunships, but then the gunship gets commandeered by the one robot arm lady from earlier, and she just murders these pilots, and then she comes down and tells them, you must now fight a war against vampires, even though you were betrayed by your government. So I guess we're the A team now. I don't know. Yeah. So. And then we get the last page kind of goes back to the vampires and them, bitching about humans and whatnot and how they're going to get their vengeance on them, and we're going to have like vampire gold people fighting each other. I did that. And there's an advertisement for the Wildcats animated series. Yay! It's an animated series. I like how they censored Voodoo's stuff. And here's Gen 13. Just... Okay, yeah, what do I think about Wetworks? Genuine. So I'm gonna put it above Youngblood just because Youngblood was really, really bad. But Wetworks is not good. I did not like this. The writing was bad. The visual sequential art storytelling was there was a huge disconnect between the two all throughout that. And the design of these characters is like stupid. Gold people, they're all going to be basically like Silver Surfer Commandos. No, just like if you're going to do a superhero comic, just do a superhero comic. Don't freaking try to be all weird and edgy and stuff. Just yeah. So that is the anticlimactic end to my Image Comics Revisited. Speaking of which, this is going to be an extra long video, so might as well let's grab them all, shall we? Alright, here they're all at. So, let's go. Who is the best? So, the best Image comic, easily, Savage Dragon. No doubt, it was easily the best book I read. Enjoyed it very much. Right after Savage Dragon, I would say Spawn, number 2, right? After Spawn, I would probably put, I guess, Wildcats. Wildcats is probably number 3 in the pack. Again, not very, I still don't really like it, but, you got to put something there. I would put Pit right after Wildcats. I would put Cyberforce behind Pit. And then it goes to Youngblood, hanging second to last. And the absolute worst is Youngblood, right? Or I should say Wetworks, second to last, and Youngblood is the worst. So there you go. Youngblood, worst. Second worst. Third worst. Middle of the pack. Okay. Still cool, and easily the best of the Image Comics. Here, Savage Dragon by Eric Larson. So that's pretty much it. I have zero desire to continue on any of these books other than maybe Savage Dragon. But it was fascinating to sort of reread these books and try to understand what the hype was for a lot of these comics from the 90s. These are ultimately, influential comics for a lot of people, especially those that grew up with them and were really into the hype. Though, as you can tell, just by looking things up, most of these did not make it. The only one that really still has relevance is Spawn. And then Savage Dragon is still being printed, but, it's not really all that popular anymore. So anyhow, that's the video. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, put you back up top, Wetworks. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, hit the bell for notifications. You got any comments about Wetworks number 1 or my entire Image Comics Revisited series? Leave it down below, and I will see you next time.